Welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to take a look at 2009 horror thriller film called The Loved Ones. The movie starts with a boy named Brent Michelle who is driving a car. His father, Dan, is with him and they are both talking when suddenly a shirtless, blood-soaked boy appears in front of their car. Swerving to save the boy, Brent's car crashes into a tree. 6 months later, Brent is shown taking drugs from his friend Jamie in high school. While Jamie and Brent are talking, a girl named Mia Valentine shows up. Jamie asks her to prom and she says yes. Then a girl named Lola asks Brent to prom, but Brent apologizes to her and tells her that he is going with his friend Holly. In the next scene, we are introduced to Holly, who tells Brent that she has got her driver's license. She then takes him on a ride. He tells her that someone asks him to go to the dance. Holly insists on telling her the name of the girl, but he tells her that he cannot tell her because the girl is sensitive. Later, when Holly drops him home, Brent finally tells her about Lola Stone, the girl who asked him to prom. When he is at home, Brent's mother Carla comes to his room and asks him who will be taking him to prom party. Brent tells her that Holly will pick him up, but his mother tells him that she doesn't have a license. He tells her that Holly just got her license that day, but his mother insists on taking a cab. When he tells her that a cab is also technically a car, Carla tells him that the cab drivers are experienced. Brent agrees with her, saying that he wasn't experienced, which is why that accident occurred and his dad died. Depressed, Brent takes his dog and goes outside. He punishes himself by hurting his hand with a razor blade. He goes to a nearby cliff to commit suicide, but then he changes his mind and sits there listening to music. Brent's mother calls him, but when he's about to pick it up, a man from behind knocks him unconscious. Then, the man takes him away in a truck. Brent's mother searches for him and reaches the nearby cliff. When she gets back home, she finds Holly, who came to pick Brent up. Carla asks her if she has seen Brent, but Holly is also unaware of his location. In the evening, Holly takes Brent's injured dog to the hospital, but it dies on the way. Carla calls Paul, who is her neighbor and also a policeman, and she tells him that Brent is missing. He tells her that Brent has done the same thing before, but he always comes back. Paul gets worried when Carla tells him that someone has stabbed their dog. Then we see in the truck which Brent was taken after his abduction. The driver picks up an animal's corpse from the road on its way. It is revealed that Lola and her father, Eric, have kidnapped Brent. Later, when Lola is in her room, her father brings a pink dress and sandals for her. She puts on the dress in front of her father, who stares at her figure. The next scene opens with Brent finding himself on a dinner table in a black suit. His hands and feet are tied to a chair. Lola and her father are seated in front of him along with a lady named Bright Eyes. Bright Eyes has a strange mark on her forehead. Brent tries to free himself, but he is tied up extremely tight, so he then succeeds at loosening the rope but waits for the right time to break out. Lola and her father has decorated their house like a prom party. She then injects Brent's voice box with bleach, and as a result, he can't scream. Lola's father takes their picture and also takes a photo of them with Bright Eyes. While dining, Lola notices that Bright Eyes is not eating, so she forcefully puts food in her mouth and misbehaves with her. Then she forces Brent to eat the chicken, but he doesn't open his mouth. She asks him to lick her finger. Brent unwillingly licks her finger, intimidated by Lola's father, who's seated in front of him with a hammer in his hand. When Brent tells her that he wants to go to the toilet, Lola empties the glass of milk and asks him to pee in it. She notices that Brent has lied to her and he doesn't really have the urge to go. She asks her father to bring the hammer. He brings the hammer and tells Brent that he has killed his dog with it. Then, Lola threatens Brent, telling him to pee within 10 seconds or her father will hammer nails into his private part. Brent somehow forces himself to pee. While Lola tries to humiliate him, he kicks her and escapes from the house. Eric goes after him and turns on the truck's headlights to find him. Brent hides under his truck, but as soon as Eric reverses his truck, he finds him and drives after him. Brent runs and climbs up a tree, and Eric hits his car to the tree and tries to search for him. Meanwhile, Lola shows up with a torch. She sees Brent on the tree and her father throws stones at him. Then, Lola hands over the torch to Eric and starts throwing stones at Brent. He eventually collapses and falls down. The sadistic father and daughter take Brent inside to the house and tie him up to the chair again. Eric pins his feet to the floor with knives to ensure that he never escapes. Brent screams, but it cannot be heard because of the bleach Lola had injected him with. Meanwhile, we see Paul the policeman who is looking for Brent. He arrives at the high cliff and only finds Brent's cell phone and a cigarette. Carla is waiting for Brent at home, and she tells Holly that Brent thinks she blames him for his dad's death in the accident. Then, Paul arrives at Carla's house and shows him Brent's belongings that he found at the cliff. Then, Lola shows Brent a scrapbook. It's revealed that Lola has been doing this with boys since their childhood. The The scrapbook contained pictures of her and her past victims. They had been doing this together for a very long time. Her idiotic father kidnaps boys and brings them to her. She enjoys herself with the boys and later on disposes of them. In the next scene, she points in her scrapbook and shows Brent a picture of a boy named Timmy Valentine, who had escaped from their captivity. Brent looks at his picture and realizes that he is the same boy who struck his car, as a result of which they had the accident and his father passed away. He turns out to be a brother of Mia Valentine, the prom date of Brent's best friend Jamie. The victim of her scrapbook this year is Brent. Lola then carves a heart with a fork on his body, writing L and S, which stands for Lola Stone. After carving a heart on his body, Lola and Eric sprinkle salt on his wounds. Eric then announces the name of the queen of the dance, and Lola Stone is selected among the other girls. She gets overjoyed and surprised as though she had been selected among the other girls in real life. Eric and Lola blow the whistles, and she forces Brent, who has been selected as king, to also blow a whistle. Then, Lola is crowned as the Queen of the Year. Eric takes Lola and Brent's photos and sprinkles sparkles all over them while they both dance. But Lola is not happy with Brent because she thinks that he is not the one whom she wants to marry. He is yet another boy with whom she will enjoy and then kill. She asks her father to dance with her instead. Brent tries to take his razor blade out of his chain from his pocket, but he drops it on the seat of the chair behind him. While dancing with her father, Lola realizes that her father is a real prince. She admits her incestuous feelings for him. When they both are about to kiss, Brent interrupts them as he sits on the chair to hide his chain. Paul meets Holly and tells her that the search and rescue team will arrive in the morning. Later, Eric cuts the animal he picked up from the road. He opens a trap door under the mat and pours water to the basement cellar. A lot of strange voices are heard from there. During this time, Brent keeps on cutting the rope on his hands with the help of the razor blade. Then, Eric takes a drill machine from his tool case and gives it to Lola. She drills a hole in Brent's forehead just like the one on Bright Eye's forehead. Her father then brings a kettle of hot water. She tells Brent that the hot water will boil his brain and he will turn into the ones down in the basement cellar. When she goes ahead to pour the hot water into the hole on his forehead, she finds the hole too small, so she asks her father if we could make it bigger. When Eric expands the hole and Brent attacks him with the razor blade he had been using to untie the rope. Then he takes out the knives plunged into his feet and stabs Eric in the neck. Lola attacks him, but Brent fights her off. He returns to Eric and throws him in the basement, where he sees many people start eating him. Lola hits Brent from the back and throws him into the basement cellar as well. She screams for her father, who is being eaten up by the starving abductees below. Then she shuts the basement door. The basement turns dark. Brent sees all the captives with a torch and kills them. Right after that, he looks around in the basement cellar and finds a heap of bones. Then Lola goes to Bright Eye's room and kills her by smothering her with a pillow. Meanwhile, Holly recalls Brent's words that Lola Stone had invited him to prom. She calls Paul and he leaves right away, heading towards her house. When he reaches there, he peeps through the window of her house and notices a lot of blood on the floor. He smashes the French door with his gun and enters the home. When Brent feels that someone is approaching, he throws his torch upwards at the basement door. When Paul hears the noise, he opens the trap door and finds Brent there. Meanwhile, Lola shows up and kills him by stabbing him in the head, making Paul fall into the basement. Brent picks up Paul's gun and shoots at Lola, but she escapes. Lola wears Brent's chain and tells him that she is going to stab his mother in the neck, just like he did to her father, and she will stab Holly in the heart, just like he did to Lola. She then takes a knife on her scrapbook and walks out barefoot because she doesn't know how to drive a car. On her way, she sees Holly, who is going to Lola's house. Holly stops her car when Lola throws her scrapbook at her windscreen. She gets inside the car and tries to assault Holly, but she manages to run away. Brent thinks of an idea and uses the pile of dead bodies as a support to get out of the basement. After getting out, he goes after Lola and Paul's car at high speed. Holly appears right in front of his car, but he somehow turns the car to save her. Lola, who was after Holly, instead gets hit at the backside of the car. Holly gets inside the car and is frightened to see Brent's terrible condition. After a while, they spot Lola Stone, who is crawling towards them despite being hit badly. Brent then reverses his car at high speed to crush Lola to death. When Brent and Holly return home, Carla hugs both of them, and with that, the movie ends here. Thanks for watching, guys.